get, correct? Right? There will be demand pull inflation, and also there will be higher pollution and depletion of natural resources. Right? I repeat again. Undesirable means that it's growing too fast. If it's growing too fast, that means there's demand pull inflation, right? There's demand pull income inequality gap worsening, correct? Right? Demand pull inflation, worsening income inequality gap, and there'll be more pollution, right? And depletion of natural resources. Agree? Pollution and depletion of natural resources. So it's no good, right? Second possibility, second type of question, right? Why undesirable? Undesirable means there's recession. Agree? The growth is too slow already, right? If the growth is too slow, it's also undesirable growth, right? Okay, right? If recession, too slow growth. Okay, why is it undesirable? If the growth is too slow, then you must write in the point of view of three parties. Okay, right? Three parties, which is to the consumer's point of view, to the producer's point of view, and the government's point of view. Agree? Right? The three parties' point of view. Okay, right? So, recession consequences, right? From the perspective of three parties, right? The government, producer, and roughly argue the answer. When there's a recession, consumers suffer because there'll be unemployment, right? There'll be unemployed, there'll be lesser income, their standard of living fall, correct? Agree? Recession time, right? Recession time, their standard of living fall, there'll be higher unemployment, correct? So it's no good, okay? Standard of living will fall, unemployment increase. Okay, to the government's point of view, government perspective, government collect lesser tax revenue, it may lead to budget deficit. Agree? Right? There will be social recession, there will be social instability. Right? Government collect lesser tax revenue, right? For the government, right? It may lead to budget deficit because the government must do expansionary policy. Recession time, government must do expansionary fiscal policy, right? It may lead to budget deficit. Agree? Recession time, to the producer point of view, right? What's the consequence? The producer will earn lesser profits, right? There will be less incentive to invest more. The outlook is bleak. Agree, right? Bleak economic outlook, right? So they invest lesser, right? Invest lesser, right? That's point of view of producer. Agree, right? Okay, now continue. Point number 9 now. Policies that Singapore government can adopt to ensure sustained economic growth. Policies now. Okay, if you are H1, this one you better study properly. Okay, H2 also must, but H1 you better study properly. Policies to achieve economic growth. Okay, so the policies is expansionary monetary, exchange, and supply side policy. 4 only, right? Correct. 4, right? But for if it's Singapore, right? You don't talk about monetary policy, correct? If it's Singapore, you need to talk about fiscal, exchange rate, and supply side, correct? Agree? Singapore don't talk about monetary at all, right? If it's a Singapore question, right, we don't talk about monetary, we only talk about fiscal, exchange rate, and supply side. Agree? The policies adopted plus the evaluation point. Agree? Together with the evaluation point. Okay, go and memorize the evaluation point as well, right? Plus the evaluation. The trade-off which we went through just now already, right? The earlier part we went through a trade-off, right? If you look at the top part here, the trade-off and conflict, right, is the same, right? Okay, point number 10 is the same as point number 1 earlier, right? So the expected trade-off when you pursue rapid economic growth, right? The trade-off is that there will be higher demand pull inflation, right? There will be higher environmental problem, there will be greater income inequality gap worsening, correct? Agree? And then BOP will worsen. BOP will worsen because when there's economic growth, you have higher income, you import more. Agree, right? Your BOP worsen. Okay, so they are altogether 4 trade-off. Demand pull inflation, BOP worsen, income inequality gap worsen, right? And then environmental problems. Done. Okay, key economic indicator now, point number 1. Economic indicator, this type of question they ask you is what is the indicator to indicate whether you have achieved your goal, right? Whether you have achieved your goal. So the indicator is for economic growth, we look at GDP, GNP. For inflation, we look at inflation rate. For unemployment, we look at unemployment rate. For income inequality, we look at Gini coefficient. I went through this, I think, last lesson. What do we use to measure productivity? Productivity. I went through that last lesson, I think double confirm. The indicator of productivity is number 1, labor cost. Labor cost will measure your productivity level, right? Are you productive? We look at labor cost. Remember, right? That's what I went through last lesson, right? Labor cost lower, you are productive, correct? What's another reason? Lower, you are productive, right? Point number 2, agree? Right, inflation rate lower, you are productive, correct? Right. Point number 3, what is indicator? Indicator of productivity. Right. Last point is exchange rate. Exchange rate weaker, you are productive, right? Because if the exchange rate is weaker, your export is cheaper. Correct, right? When your exchange rate is depreciated, right? Your export is cheaper. So the indicator to indicate whether are you productive, you look at these 3. Remember, right? We went through that last week. Lower labor costs, lower inflation rate, and exchange rate weaker. Correct? Okay, that's the indicator. Right, point number 2, indicate statistical data, right? That means you must look at the table in the case study. The country is doing well or not? Is the country performing well or not? Right, so you look at all the indicators of inflation, unemployment, right? Budget deficit. Agree, right? Gini coefficient. Next one, assess the economic performance of an economy using key economic indicator, right? So economic performance is, you must see all these, right? Inflation, unemployment, BOP, all that, blah, 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 right? Okay, next. Point number 4 is assess the limitation of using indicators, using national income figures to measure standard of living over time and over space. Okay, standard of living type of question, standard of living question. Point number 4, indicator to compare between standard of living. Okay, let me give you the limitation. Limitation, let's recap. To measure standard of living, first limitation is that instead of using GDP, we need to use real GDP. Agree? Because you must take into account inflation, correct? Instead of GDP, we use real GDP. And instead of using real GDP, we need real GDP per capita instead. Agree? That's the next point, right? Agree? So instead of GDP, we use real GDP. Instead of real GDP, we use real GDP per capita. Instead of real GDP per capita, we need Gini coefficient as well, right? Agree? Gini coefficient. And then instead of only Gini coefficient, we must also take into account, right, leisure hours, correct? Pollution index, number of working hours, number of working hours. Right, people, if I talk to you, you don't know what is happening, totally lost, you know. Number of working hours, to look at leisure hours, right? Then pollution index, right? Pollution index, which are non-material as well, right? Pollution index. Agree? Underground economy, right? Like gambling, prostitution, right? Underground economy. Agree? Right? You also should take into account, it's not only the quantity is better, right? Agree, so look at the quality of the goods as well, right? So look at leisure time, look at pollution level, look at quality, correct? Look at underground economy, agree? Underground economy, right? Look at population size, look at inflation rate as well, right? You need real, because you need the pollution, inflation rate, agree? Between countries, right? You must compare the data collection method. Agree? Because when they collect data for GDP may not be accurate, right? Agree, alright? Because especially for larger countries, I repeat, especially for larger countries, they collect GDP data may not be accurate, correct? Agree, that's the other point, right? The GDP data collected, the data collection may not be accurate. Done? Okay, data collection may not be accurate. Okay, next one, theory of income determination, circular flow of income. Okay, explain circular flow of income and how equilibrium is reached. How equilibrium is reached. That means you must know about withdrawal and injection type of question. Correct, right? Withdrawal, injection type of question. In case you have forgotten, right? Withdrawal is also known as leakage. But this question you very long never do it. Right? Correct, right? Withdrawal leakage must be equals to the injection. Right? Withdrawal leakage must be equals to the injection. Okay, right? Your withdrawal is your S plus T plus M. Okay, right? And then equals to I plus G plus X. Agree? Right? S plus T plus M equals to I plus G plus X, right? That's your injection, right? Okay, right? Let's begin. So the exam question will ask you, okay? The exam question will ask you, if there is a fall in exports, how does it affect the equilibrium level of national income? Right, I repeat again, if there's a fall in export, how does it affect equilibrium level of national income? Correct? Okay, exports fall, how does it affect equilibrium? Okay, so the answer is this. When exports fall, AD will fall, right? Economic growth will fall. And when economic growth fall, your income will fall. Income level 4, listen, exports 4 means 84, 84 means economic growth 4, employment level 4, right? When your income level 4 means, listen, you have lesser money, you save lesser. And then when your income level 4, you pay lesser taxes. When your income level 4, you import lesser. Do you realize that all these three will start to fall? S will fall, T will fall, M will fall, right? Eventually, it will reach equilibrium again. Agree? Eventually, it becomes equals again, right? Because when X fall, I repeat, when X fall, then injection will less than withdrawal. Agree? Because this X fall, X4 means in the end the injection will be lesser already, right? But then because your X4, your income fall. Income fall means you save lesser, you pay lesser taxes, and then you import lesser. Eventually, it will become back to equilibrium again. It will reach equals again. Agree? Circular flow of income, viewer. Make sure you are following. Right? So when there's lesser injection, exports fall, right? Means income fall. AD fall, economical fall, income fall, right? Income fall means you have lesser money for savings, lesser money for tax, lesser money to import. Right? Eventually, it will become equals again. Right? That's how the equilibrium level of national income is reached. Okay, this question, I went through long ago. So if those who just joined for tuition I went through long ago. So if you need the video lesson, I have recorded the video lesson for circular flow. If you totally don't know circular flow you better WhatsApp me. Okay, you can WhatsApp me, right? And then tell me you need circular flow video. I can send you the videos for circular flow. Right? I've taught this circular flow lesson before, long ago. I think in January or February. Right? So if you need the video, you can WhatsApp me. Give me your email address, right? I can send you the circular flow videos if you don't know what I'm talking about. Right? The circular flow equilibrium level of national income question. Okay? Right, next one, point number 2. Illustrate the full multiplier process. Okay, the full multiplier process numerical illustration is only for H2. Right, only for H2. So only H2, then you must illustrate the entire multiplier process. Correct, right? The entire multiplier process, round 1, round 2, round 3. Only if H2. Only if H2, right? Round 1, round 2, and round 3, right? Okay. Point number 3, factors influencing the size of the multiplier in Singapore. The formula is given by K equals to 1 over MPS MPT plus MPM, correct? Agree, right? Those are the 3 factors that influence the size of multiplier between both countries. Okay, right? So let me explain. MPS, MPS, okay, savings, MPS, MPS, what affects MPS? Okay, first point, compulsory CPF savings, correct? Agree, compulsory savings of CPF will affect MPS. Second point, Asian values of thrift, right? Singapore, right? Asian values of thrift, so MPS is high. Agree? Follow up, people, right? Asian values of thrift and compulsory savings of CPF. Tax rates, our tax rates are kept low. Our MPT is low because when I attract foreign talent, attract FDI. MPM is high because lack of natural resources. Right? MPM, right? Lack of natural resources, and therefore we need to import, right? Raw materials. Agree, right? Marginal propensity to save, marginal propensity to tax, marginal propensity to import. Okay, so MPM is, I repeat, import, right? We import a lot because lack of natural resource, right? We need to import raw material. Agree? Taxes we keep low because we attract foreign talent and FDI, right? Savings is high because we have compulsory CPF savings and also because of Asian values of thrift. That right? So for Singapore multiplier small, US multiplier large, right? So this is a 10-mark question also. Okay, right? Once done, next page, page 2, unemployment. Come on, persevere, we can do it. Right? Unemployment, unemployment, we define unemployment. Unemployment refers to, okay, willing to work, right, but unable to find suitable employment. Agree, that's unemployment, right? The number of people of the legal age, I repeat the definition again, I'll try to memorize, unemployment, right? Number of people of the legal age who are willing and able to work but unable to find suitable employment. Agree, willing and able to work, right, but cannot find a job. Agree, right? For unemployment, there's different types of unemployment, right? The different type of unemployment is structural, cyclical, and frictional, correct? Cyclical, structural, and frictional unemployment. Only these 3 types is necessary. Okay, right? Structural, cyclical, and frictional unemployment. Then the exam question asks you in Singapore context. Okay, if they ask you for unemployment in Singapore context, okay, in Singapore context, right, you must have specific example. So you must give example of the unemployment in Singapore. Okay, you must give a specific example. You must give example of the cyclical unemployment. So you must say things like maybe USA subprime crisis, world recession, and therefore there's cyclical unemployment in Singapore. Right? In Singapore context, page 2 people, right? Cyclical unemployment, fictional and structural. Right? So I must see examples, okay, for this question, right? Different types of unemployment. Then they can also ask you the unemployment in developing versus developed. Right? Developing versus developed country, right? The different types of unemployment. Okay, so I emphasize on people. So when you go home, tell me what you don't have. Most of the things in your JC knows one. Some number maybe don't have, then you must tell me. Then you must go back and try go and find form so that you know that right, this is actually very good. You go and collate, you collate properly. Actually the day before A-levels you got just a few pages of paper you can study. Right, so you go back and collate, see whether you got the examples for different type of unemployment, right? Examples you need, right? Singapore examples right? The structural and cyclical one. Okay, whatever you don't have, you better let me know. 2 days I'll go and hunt it for you. Okay, point number 3, explain why low unemployment is an objective. Okay, why low unemployment is objective? Let me give you the first point. Low unemployment is objective because if there's high unemployment, point number 3, if there's high unemployment, there's a loss of output. First point, agree? Right, loss of output, right? Hey, memorize, right? Point number 3, loss of output, right? High unemployment, there will be erosion of skills. Agree? If you are unemployed for too long, right? If you are unemployed for too long, there's erosion of skills, right? Agree? So it's bad, okay? Erosion of skills. Third point, when there's high unemployment, government loss of tax revenue, right? Agree, right? Government loss of tax revenue, right? High unemployment is bad, right? Government loss of tax revenue, right? Government may end up in a budget deficit, right? Next point, unemployment is bad, rate, suicide rates, divorce rates, correct? Right? There'll be more social problems. Done. Okay, right? Now listen, the consequences of unemployment, consequences, right? You need to split up into the economic agents. So look at point number 5, point number 5, right? This is the hot topic that will appear. Okay, so they will ask you, the consequences of unemployment to the consumer, to the government, and to the producer. You must split up. So when you go back and do your notes out, right? You go and try see whether you can split up into these 3 points of view or not. That's how the exam question will be set. Okay, the 3 points of view, go and split up, right? It's not so straightforward anymore. So the exam question will ask you for consequences of unemployment. They will split up very specifically. They'll tell you what's the consequence to the consumer. So you must go back and collate the answers, right? Okay, this point is important. Okay, next one, point number 4, right? Point number 4, causes of demand deficit unemployment, right? Demand deficit unemployment means AD falling. AD fall, demand deficit unemployment, right? Means AD is low. Okay, so what causes AD to be low, right? AD to be low, the answer is maybe exchange rate too strong. Agree? Exchange rate is too strong. Because exchange rate too strong, nobody wants to export. First reason, agree? Exchange rate is too strong, export is expensive. So AD will fall, right? Second reason, because maybe higher inflation. Your country, the inflation rate very high, so your exports very expensive. Right? Exports very expensive, so AD fall, right? Agree, Right? Another reason, maybe a corporate tax rate too high. Your tax rate too high, your investor don't want to come in already. Your investment fall, right? Investment fall means AD fall, right? Demand deficit unemployment. Agree? Right? So 3, maybe corporate tax rate too high. Agree, right? Therefore investments don't come in. Agree? Maybe another outlook. Outlook is bleak. Agree? Business outlook is bleak. Consumer outlook is bad. So C and I fall, right? Agree, right? C and I fall means AD fall. Correct? Right? This gives you a demand deficient unemployment. Okay? Point number 6. This for everybody. Point number 6. Policy adopted by Singapore government to policy that Singapore government can do to reduce unemployment. Policy. So it is expansionary fiscal policy, right? Expansionary fiscal policy plus limitation, correct? Agree, expansionary fiscal policy. Exchange rate policy, right? We can depreciate our currency. Agree, depreciate our currency. And then we can also do supply side policy, correct? To solve structural unemployment. Correct, right? Supply side policy, right? To solve unemployment. Right, so expansionary fiscal policy, supply side policy, and exchange rate policy. Done? Okay, right? Those policies pass evaluation now, right? So go back and make sure you also memorize the evaluation. Right, the evaluation. Done? Okay, point number 7 is trade-off, which we have gone through earlier off, so we can ignore that. Okay, now let's go to inflation now. Inflation type of question, right? Inflation type of question, you must define inflation. Okay, inflation is sustained inordinate increase in general price level, right? Correct or not? The sustained sustained inordinate increase in GPL. Part 2, the different type of inflation with Singapore examples. So go back, make sure you know your example. Go back and hunt your example, right? The inflation is demand pull, cost push, examples to use. Why there's demand pull inflation in Singapore and why there's cost push in Singapore. Agree, right? With examples. Correct, people? As long as you can answer the checklist, I think you're quite safe. Okay, demand pull, cost push with Singapore examples. Okay, point number 3, why low inflation is important. Okay, why low inflation is important for Singapore. Okay, low inflation is important. Okay, why is it important? Correct, right? Because, okay, let me explain. Low inflation is good because when prices increase slowly, right? Correct, right? Producers will be more incentivized to produce higher. I repeat again, low inflation is good. Low inflation is good because when prices increase slowly, right, producers will be incentivized to increase production because profit level higher, Agree, right? Profit level higher, right? So they will produce more. Correct, right? When inflation is low. Okay, that's one point. There are many more points that people go back and check as well. Okay, for low inflation is good. Okay, next one. Then the other question that I ask you is high inflation is bad. High inflation is bad. Okay, let me tell you why high inflation is bad. First point, high because export become more expensive. Export prices become more expensive, X will fall, right? The AD will fall, economy will fall, employment level fall. Correct? Agree? When there's high inflation, it's bad because it makes your export less competitive. Agree, right? Your export will become less competitive, right? Because your export become more expensive. Then your export will fall, AD will fall, economy will fall, employment level fall, right? And when exports fall, your current account worsen, your BOP worsen. Correct? And also, when there's inflation, it will affect income redistribution. Income will be redistributed, will suffer. Because inflation, the fixed income, right? If you earn a fixed income, it will suffer. Right? Fixed income earner will suffer, right? Correct? But those who earn variable income, they will benefit. Variable income, they will benefit. Right? Okay, right? Then it will also benefit the debtor. Debtor will benefit, but the creditors will suffer. Debtor will benefit. Debtors are the one who owe people money, Debtor is the one who owe people money, Owe people money, right? Debtor is the one that owe people money. Creditor is the one that is, I lend you the money last time. Right? Creditor is the one that lend you the money last time. The debtor is the borrower. Debtor is the borrower. Right? So the borrower will benefit. Borrower will benefit. I repeat, right? When there's inflation, the borrower will benefit. Because last time I borrowed $1,000, now I return back, the value is lesser because there's inflation. Right? Because there's inflation, right? The value I return, the $1,000, the value I return is lesser already. So the debtor will benefit. Debtor is the one who borrowed money last time. The borrower. Agree, right? So those are consequences, right? There are other consequences as well. BOP, consequences on inflation, right? The investment will be lower, right? Consequences. Okay, go and collate the consequences based on consumer, producer, and government again. Right? That's how the exam question will be set, right? So consequences based on these 3 points of view. Okay, people, you must go back and find your notes and then go and fit it in. Okay, next one. Trade-off, I think we're done. Okay, now deflation now. Deflation, what is meant by deflation? And people, this check this very, very detailed one. Deflation means prices fall, right? Prices fall. Okay, now when will deflation happen? Deflation will happen usually during a recession time. Recession time, the C&I fall, AD fall, right? Correct, right? Deflation will happen. Agree? Right? Deflation happens when there is AD falling. Agree? AD falling, usually during recession time. Right? So deflation means fall in GPL. Correct, right? Deflation means there's a fall in GPL. Done. Okay, next one. Then what is stagflation? Okay, stagflation. Stagflation means listen, stagflation means the AD fall and yet there's also a fall in SRAS. Okay? Stagflation, stagflation means AD falling, right? AD falling and SRAS fall. In other words, there's higher cost push inflation. Right? And there's AD falling. Right? I repeat again, stagflation, in case you don't know. Stagflation means there's a stagnant growth, that means there's a slow growth. So AD fall, right? Stagflation comes over stagnant, stagnant means AD falling. Right? Stagnant means AD falling. Inflation means comes from the inflation. When there's AD falling, cannot be demand pull AD falling cannot be demand pull, right? So the only inflation is cost push. So together stagflation means AD fall plus cost push inflation. Right? I repeat again now, right? Stagflation means stagnant means slow growth, so AD fall. Inflation means inflation. Right? In this case, because AD fall, it cannot be demand pull already. Cannot be demand pull. It must be cost push. Agree? Right? Okay, so stagflation means AD falling and SRAS fall because there's cost push inflation. Right? So that's stagflation. Correct? Right? In other words, for stagflation, people, look at the screen. In other words, for stagflation, okay, the answer is look at that. Look at the screen, people, look at the screen. Right? SRAS 1 fall to SRAS 2. Right? And AD also fall. AD 1 fall to AD 2. Right? Do you realize that there will be an increase in inflation and there will be a fall in economic growth? Right? Go and try drawing out the diagram. I repeat again, right? The AD will fall, the SRAS will fall, right? So GPL will increase, and then your real national income will fall. That's the meaning of stagflation. Right? I repeat one more time. Stagflation means your prices goes up and your economic growth fall at the same time. That's stagflation. Okay, I repeat one more time, right? Stagflation means the AD leftward shift and then the SRAS shift to the left, right? So the intersection now is that prices goes up and the national income fall. Agree? Okay, that's stagflation. Done. Okay, right? And follow people, follow, right? Go back and check, make sure your notes, go back and check and then go and fill it in. Okay, right, once done, BOP now. Can BOP, BOP, right, identify the various components of BOP, So the various components of BOP is current account, capital account, right? And then your current account, capital account, and your last one is the, what account is that? Official financing account, correct, right? The three accounts, right? Current account, capital account, and official financing account, right? Next question, part 3, is why is BOP favorable and important in? Right? Why is BOP favorable and important in? Right? Go back and find your notes. Go and memorize that. Okay? And the causes of large deficit. Okay? This one is the one that's often said. Causes of large deficit. Okay? What causes? Reasons why BOP deficit. Okay? I'll give you the first answer now. People go right in. Reasons why BOP deficit. Right? First reason. Because your exchange rate too strong. Exchange rate too strong. Nobody wants to buy your export. So current account deficit. Agree? First reason, okay? Right, why there's a deficit? Because your currency too strong. First part, okay? Right, currency too strong, export will fall, current account deficit. Second reason is because of inflation. Your inflation rate too high, so you deficit, right? Inflation rate too high, your export will fall, export fall, you deficit, Agree, right? Second part, okay? Exchange rate too strong, inflation too high, correct? Third reason, your income level too high. Because your income level too high, you import a lot. You got higher purchasing power, you import more. Right? That's the third reason, right? Income level higher, purchasing power higher, you import more. Agree? Third reason, okay? Right? So exchange rate, inflation rate, income level higher. Done? Right? That causes the BOP deficit. Correct? Right? Okay? Next one. Point number 5. Impact of deficit. This one hot topic this year, right? They split into 3 parties, right? Consumer, producer, and government point of view. Okay, right? Go and collate the points. Point number 6. Policies to reduce deficit. Okay, to solve the deficit problem, right? What are the policies? The answer is this, Okay, listen, deficit, you can do expenditure switching policy. Expenditure switching policy, right? Hey, people, some of you don't even know what's happening already. Expenditure switching policy. In other words, expenditure switching means you depreciate the currency so that other country will buy from you, switch to you, right? Expenditure switching means you depreciate currency, right? The other one is expenditure reducing policy. Reducing policy means you do contractionary fiscal policy and monetary policy, right? Expenditure reducing. Reducing policy means you lower your income, right? So that they no money to buy import. Agree, right? You lower your income so that they buy lesser, import lesser, right? To solve the deficit. So there's expenditure switching, expenditure reducing, right? And then the third policy is supply side policy. Supply side policy, so that your exports will become cheaper. Your export become cheaper, more people will buy your exports. Agree? Make your export cheaper lah. Supply side policy. Okay, right? So there's expenditure reducing, expenditure switching, and then supply side policy. Correct? Agree, right? The three policies are right, plus evaluation. Okay, so make sure you have the evaluation point as well. Done, people? Point number 6, okay, right? Agree, plus evaluation. Okay, point number 7, trade-off. We have gone through that earlier, right? The trade-off. Done? Okay, now people, let me make some announcements now. Okay, so therefore, we stop here. Okay, listen, let me make some announcement. Follow. Today, what you must do is this. Listen, serious. Go back, you go and collate the answers for until here. Hey, don't drag people. Already, you should try and collate the answer lah. Go and take your JC notes, go and collate. You should collate in like point form, like what I went through today, right? It's all point form, right? Only the subheader. You go and collate the subheaders so that you can have a few pieces of paper by the day before A level. You can take and memorize, One whole stack of notes, right? Then you'll be too stressed to study, So much shit how to study. So what I'm suggesting you to do now is that you go and take a piece of paper or you take computer lah. You take your JC notes. Go and extract out the headers. Just the point form only for all these questions. Go and do until what I went through until here. Go and do until here. You understand, right? Until here lah, okay? Then next week I will continue with the rest You understand? Then within 2 weeks we can collate the content out. If you understand what I'm trying to say, people, you must go and do out the answer. Okay, listen, you do already. Then if you want me to check, right, you can actually give it to me. I can check it for you. I can double check for you, right? So you must go and collate until here. That's the count. In other words, if you still have missing point, that means if you like cannot find your notes, right, you can WhatsApp me. You WhatsApp me, and then maybe I can email you some essays, right? You can extract out the answer one. Like some parts, like maybe example cannot find, example of maybe Singapore context you don't have, or example of develop versus developing you cannot find. If you cannot find your notes, you can WhatsApp me. Then I can send you some essays you can actually extract from the essay one. Right? So you must go and find the points until here. Roughly understand, people? By this week, you should try and clear this. Then if you need me to help you mark to check whether you correct or not, right? You can pass it to me. Agree, people? Follow the checklist. Once you have the checklist, actually quite safe one. Your content is there already. Okay, that's the okay, correct. And then next week, then we'll continue. So next week you must bring this stack as well. Okay, right, let's begin monitoring. We continue from here, right? That's where we left off last week. Okay, monetary policy. Why Singapore use exchange rate policy instead of interest rate policy? Okay, what are the keywords I must see in the answer, right? Why Singapore use exchange rate instead of interest rate? Okay, so the first keyword I must see is because we are very open economy, right? Very open economy. We cannot control money supply, right? We cannot control money supply. We are very open to capital flows, right? These are the words we use, right? We are very open economy. We cannot control money supply. We are very open to capital flow, correct? Open to capital flow. Singapore is an interest rate taker, correct? Right? We are interest rate taker. These are the keywords, right? I repeat, we are very open economy. We are very open to capital flows. Singapore is an interest rate taker, right? Okay, and therefore we are unable to control interest rate. Agree, right? We are unable to control interest rate, right? So in Singapore, monetary policy is not effective, correct? These are the keywords, right? Open economy, open to capital flow, correct? Right? We are interest rate taker. We cannot control interest rate, right? In Singapore, we cannot control interest rate, and therefore monetary policy not effective, correct? Okay. On the other hand, why we use exchange rate policy? So I must explain the other side. On the other hand, we use exchange rate policy because, okay, so why we use exchange rate policy? Because we are heavily dependent on trade, correct? Agree, We are heavily dependent on trade, right? We are dependent on X minus M, right? On trade, because we are a small country, we need to export to the world, correct? Right? The other reason is that because the other reason is because we are lack of natural resources, we need to import raw material. Right? Lack of natural resources, we need to import raw material. This is a continuation of last week's lesson, right? So you need paper and then you need to fill in. If you don't have, you can collect one copy from behind. Right? If you didn't bring your last week's words, you can take one copy from behind. Right? Otherwise, you need a piece of paper to fill in the answers for all these checklists. Okay, I repeat again. Monetary policy. Why Singapore use exchange rate instead of interest rate? Okay, the answer is this. We do not use monetary policy in Singapore because we are too open. We are too open. These are keywords. We are too open to capital flow. Right? We cannot control money supply. Right? Because we are too open to capital flows. Second point is because we are interest rate taker. Right? That's another keyword. Interest rate taker, we cannot control interest rate. Right? We usually follow the interest rate set by US. Right? So we cannot control interest rate and therefore monetary policy not effective. Okay? On the other hand, we use exchange rate policy. Right? Exchange rate policy because we are heavily dependent on trade. Right? We are heavily dependent on trade. We are dependent on exports. Correct? Dependent on exports. Right? And also because we lack of natural resources, right? And therefore we need to import raw material. Correct? Lack of natural resources and therefore we need to import raw materials. Done? Okay, once done. Question 2 now. How changes in interest rate affect other goals? Okay, and evaluate. Interest rate change. How does it affect other goals? Okay, so let me give you the answer now. Interest rate, for example, if interest rate fall, okay, interest rate fall, cost of borrowing lower, C will increase, I will increase, AD will increase, multiple increase in national income, economic growth, employment, and as well. First part, agree? Right, this one quite okay. Interest rate change will affect cost of borrowing, so affect CI, AD will increase, multiple increase in national income, economic growth, employment. Correct? Agree? Not only that, standard of living, right? Not only that, when investment increase, it will also increase AS, correct? Agree? Investment increase, investment is unique, right? AS will also increase, right? Because it's capital goods. Capital goods will also increase AS, correct, right? AD and AS. Okay, not only that, continue. Interest rate fall, it will lead to hot money outflow as well. Agree? Hot money outflow means capital account will worsen, BOP account will worsen. Agree? Correct, right? Because the question is asking you interest rate change, how will affect other goals, right? So when interest rate fall, hot money will leave, right? Hot money outflow means capital account worsen, BOP worsen, correct? Okay, next. Correct, next one. And when hot money outflow, next one, hot money outflow means there's more supply of domestic currency in the forex market. There's more supply of the currency now. In the foreign exchange market, there's more supply. And therefore what happened? The currency will depreciate. Agree? Currency depreciate, then there'll be more effects as well. Continue. Currency depreciate means price of export will become cheaper. Agree? Right, this is a continuation of last week's notes, right? If you don't have last week's notes, go and collect one copy from behind. If you didn't bring last week's notes, right? And then also you need a white paper to fill it. Okay, right? Export will be cheaper, means exports will increase. Current account will improve. BOP account will improve. Correct? This is the impact. Right? This one 15 mark question. Okay, right? I repeat again, right? I repeat one more time. The question, I repeat, I'm talking about question 2 now. How does interest rate affect other goals? Okay, question 2, we are continuing what we did last week. Okay, how does interest rate affect other goals? 15 mark question. Interest rate fall. Cost of borrowing cheaper. C and I increase, AD increase, multiple increase in national income, economic growth, employment, standard of living. Right, hot money will also outflow, right? Interest rate fall, hot money will leave, right? Hot money outflow means capital account worsen, BOP worsen, correct? Hot money outflow, same thing. Hot money outflow means there's more supply of currency in the forex market now already. That means currency will depreciate. Currency depreciate means export cheap. Correct? Currency depreciate means export cheaper. Export cheaper means more people buy export, right? X will increase means current account improve, BOP improves. Correct? Right? So this is the impact when interest rate change. Done? Correct? Continue. Okay, right? Then the evaluation marks, the A grade marks is this. Listen, the impact, how does interest rate change affect the other goals? The impact depends on, listen, first evaluation point, depends on size of K, correct? Agree, first point, okay, right? Depends on the size of K, right? If the multiplier size is small, then the multiple for increase in national income is small, correct? Agree? First evaluation depends on size of K, correct? Second evaluation, this is the second evaluation. Even if interest rate fall, investment may not increase. The link between here and here depends on MEI curve. Depends on MEI, because even if you lower interest, if the MEI curve is inelastic, this is interest rate, MEI, right? If the MEI is inelastic, there will only be a less than proportionate increase in investment level. Correct? If the MEI is inelastic, right? This is the second evaluation. Right? So may not be effective, right? Okay, so the A grade answer is it depends on size of multiplier, correct? It depends on MEI curve, correct? Agree, right? This will affect the extent of the impact. Done. Okay, right? Let's continue. So question 2 can do. Right? How changes in interest rate affect all 4 goals? Done. Okay, right? Once done. Next one, exchange rate policy now. Continue. Exchange rate policy. Explain the various types of exchange rate system. Right? Because as I go through, try and see whether you know the answer or not. The 3 types: fixed exchange rate system, managed float exchange rate system, right? And flexible exchange rate system. Agree? The 3 types exchange rate system, right? Fixed exchange rate system, floating exchange rate system, and then the other one is managed float exchange rate system. Agree? The 3 exchange rate system, right? Correct, Andy? Okay, right? So for Singapore, we use the managed float system, right? In Singapore, right, is demand supply plus government intervention, correct? Managed float means the government will step in, right? If it's too strong, the government will depreciate it. If it's too weak, the government will make it stronger. Correct? Managed float means demand supply plus government intervention. Correct? Right? Okay. Floating system means totally free floating, right? Or we use the word flexible exchange rate system means totally demand supply one, right? That determines the exchange rate. Government will not intervene at all, right? Totally demand supply intersection, right? Government will not intervene. That's floating. Correct? Fixed exchange rate system is last time used to be China. China does a fixed exchange rate system long time ago, before the year 2005. Right? Before the year 2005, China did fix. Fixed means the government determine the exchange rate. Right? Is fixed. Done. Okay, so fixed means government intervene, government determine. Floating means just demand supply. Managed float is a Singapore government example, correct? Right? Where the government allow demand supply plus government intervention. Done? Okay, now listen. Now the next question is this. In order to do managed float, exchange rate system or floating exchange rate, or fixed exchange rate system, okay, these two, in order to do these 2 type of system, right, the government needs a lot of foreign currency reserves in order to do it. Because if you want to manage flow, that means, for example, if the government wants to appreciate the currency, right, the government must take the foreign currency reserves, sell away, and buy back the Sing dollar so that Sing dollar can appreciate back. So in order to do this system, I repeat, in order for this managed float system to happen, right, the government needs a lot of reserves. We need a lot of foreign exchange reserves, right? We need a lot of foreign currency reserves in order to adopt a managed float system, right? If you don't have foreign currency reserves, you cannot intervene in the market, right? You cannot intervene in the foreign exchange market. Agree? Okay, right? So the 3 system is fixed, floating, and managed float. Okay, so second point number 2 now. So explain the managed float system in the Singapore context. Okay, the managed float system in the Singapore context, managed float in Singapore context is the government allow the exchange rate demand supply intersect to be within a certain band, within a certain limit, right? Demand supply forces will work. If it's outside of the band, the government will intervene to bring it back to the band. So within a certain limit, right, the government demand supply will work. If it's outside, if it's too strong, the government will intervene to make it weaker, to fall back in the band. If it's too weak, the government will intervene to make it stronger. So it must be within a certain limit. Okay, that is how the managed float system in Singapore works. Okay, so I give an example. That means it must be within this band. If it's too strong, they will intervene to make it weaker. If it's too weak, they will intervene to make it stronger. Correct, right? That's the managed float system. Okay, let me tell you why. Why the Singapore government adopt the managed float system? Okay, why? Cannot be too strong, cannot be too weak. Okay, point number 2. Why cannot be too strong? Why cannot be too weak? Okay, let me tell you why. Because if it's too strong, if the Sing dollar is too strong, right, the price of Singapore's exports will become expensive. Agree? If the currency too strong means Singapore's exports too expensive, we are less competitive. Agree? Less price competitive, right? So cannot too strong. Cannot be too weak also. Because if the currency too weak, then our price of imported raw material will become too expensive. Correct? Agree? Our imported raw material will be too expensive, right? So therefore, Singapore government don't want it to be too strong, don't want it to be too weak. It must be within a certain limit. Agree? We say it's a band. Right? It's a band. Within this band, the government allow demand supply forces to work. Demand supply intersect will give you the exchange rate. But if it's outside the band, right, the government will intervene, bring it back to the band. Right? That's how the managed float system works. Because I repeat again, if it's too strong, our exports is too expensive. If it's too weak, our import is expensive. And we are heavily dependent on importing raw material because we lack of natural resource. Agree? We lack of natural resource. So we cannot have it too strong, cannot have it too weak, right? That's the managed float system. Agree? Okay, now point number 3 now. If you these are all possible questions, so I go through the checklist. Point number 3, explain the factor affecting the changes in exchange rate under the flexible exchange rate system. Okay, what affects the exchange rate in a flexible system? 10-mark question. 10-mark question, especially your H1. This one, you better listen, right? This one, I expect hot topic. Right? Factors affecting the exchange rate in a flexible system. Okay, what will affect exchange rate? Point number 1, okay. For example, if there is more demand for the currency will appreciate, correct? Agree? Right? If there's more demand, the currency will appreciate, right? Okay, so what will happen? Number 1, the reason is because maybe there's more exports. Agree? If there is more exports, don't blindly copy, make sure you understand. If there are more exports, that means there will be more demand for your currency. Your currency will appreciate, right? Agree? First point, okay? Second reason, maybe because there's more FDI inflow. Because FDI want to come in, so they demand more for your currency, right? Agree? So currency appreciate, right? Possible? Correct, right? Because FDI wants to come in, they want more of currency, right? Third example, the reason is because maybe there's more hot money inflow. Because hot money inflow, so more demand for currency, right? So your currency appreciate, right? Agree? Because hot money inflow, more demand for currency, so currency appreciate. Correct? Okay, so these are the factors that affect the exchange rate, right? In Singapore, right? And more exports, more FDI inflow, more hot money inflow. Correct? Done. Okay, once done. Point number 4. What is the relationship between inflation and exchange rate? Okay, inflation and exchange rate. What is the relationship? Okay, I'll give you the answer. Listen, if there's high inflation, this one case study question usually. Inflation and exchange rate, what is the link, right? The link is this. When there's high inflation, price of exports will become expensive. Agree? Alright, follow. Inflation means export expensive, right? Export expensive means the export will fall, right? Correct? Nobody wants to export anymore, correct? Your export fall means there's lesser demand for currency now, right? Therefore, currency depreciate. This part, agree? Right? Inflation means export expensive, means X will fall. X fall means lesser demand for currency, currency depreciate, correct? Agree? Okay, now. Then, on the other hand, I want to argue now, exchange rate, how you affect inflation? Okay, so exchange rate on the other side. If exchange rate depreciates, what will happen is that price of export will become cheaper. Correct? If the exchange rate depreciate means export cheaper, right? Export cheaper means export will increase, right? Export increase means AD will increase, right? AD increase means, do you know that there will be demand pull inflation? Agree? Correct. Not only that, when the currency depreciate, price of import will become expensive, right? Currency depreciate means you buy import expensive, right? Import expensive means it will lead to imported inflation, right? Agree? Do you see how it affects inflation? Correct, right? I repeat one more time. Right, I repeat one more time. Okay, the question asks you the relationship between inflation and exchange rate, right? Is that when there's inflation, exports expensive. Export expensive, export fall, right? Export means lesser demand for currency, right? Nobody wants a currency. Lesser demand for currency means currency depreciate. Correct, right? Agree, right? And then if the currency depreciate, on the other hand, so second point, if the exchange rate depreciate, export cheaper. Export cheaper means more people export, right? Means AD will increase. AD increase means demand for inflation. Correct? Agree, and when currency depreciate means import expensive, import expensive means imported inflation. Correct? Agree, that's the relationship between inflation and exchange rate. Exchange rate and inflation. Correct? Agree, okay, next one. The question can also change. The question can also ask you, what is the relationship between internal value of money and the external value of money? Okay, so internal means inflation. Internal means inflation. External means exchange rate. Okay, right? Internal and external. So the question says relationship between internal value and external value. That means the question is asking what's the relationship between inflation and exchange rate. Correct, right? That means you just have to say that when there's inflation, export expensive. Export expensive means exports fall. Exports fall means lesser demand for currency. Currency depreciate. So the relationship is inverse. Because when the inflation goes up, right, currency goes down. Correct? The value goes down. One goes up, one goes down. Inverse. Correct? Inverse relationship. Done? Okay, right? Once done. Question 5. Question 5, exchange rate policy and how it solves the 4 economic problem. So those who were here on the last week's Wednesday and Thursday lesson, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday lesson, right? Those who were here for extra lesson, I bet you receive. Exchange rate policy, how it affect the 4 goals, right? Agree, depreciate the currency during times of recession and high unemployment. When there's high unemployment and recession, you depreciate the currency. When there's inflation, you appreciate the currency. Agree, right? So I summarize this one. Right? You appreciate during inflation. You depreciate when there's a recession time. And when there's high size, that means you don't have so many teachers, don't have so many army, policemen, don't need so many public servants. Right, public sector, you cut public sector. Manpower policies such as reducing power of trade union and removing unemployment benefits. Pro-competition policy, that is called market-oriented. Okay, I'll go through one more time. Interventionist means nationalization. Nationalize means the government take over to run, take control to run it. Nationalize means the government take control to run. Okay, that's interventionist. Regulation by government, incentives given by government, infrastructure developed by government. This is called interventionist. It's not quite common sense because interventionist means intervene, means the government step in, right? Intervene means the government step in, right? So the government step in by nationalization. That means the government take control to run, right? By regulation, government set more rules and regulation. By giving incentives by the government, right? And then build infrastructure is also by government. That's interventionist. Okay, the government intervene. Market-oriented, market-oriented means the government open up to competition. Common sense, open up the market, right? Open up the market means open the country to more competition. Example, right? Pro-competition policy. Agree? Reduce power of the trade union so that the wages will not be so high. Open up to just demand supply forces of wages. Right? There's no government, there's no intervention by trade union. Right? So there's pure demand supply and removing unemployment benefits so that the workers will be more incentivized to work. Right? There's no more unemployment benefits. Okay? Reduce public sector so that the private sector can take over. Right? Instead of the government service, right? The private sector can take over, right? So that is market oriented, right? Market oriented. Repeat, market oriented means we open up to free market, right? Open up a free market. So open up a free market means you don't have so many public sector. That means more private sector. That means you let the free market work already. Agree, no more government, no more government, right? Open up the free market. That's called market oriented. Okay, right? Next one, point number 4 now, right? Point number 4 is labor productivity. Labor productivity and how it affects the 4 goals. Okay, that's another question. Labor productivity and how it affects the 4 goals. Okay, right? Go back and make sure you can try and answer this, right? When you're more productive, this will lower unit cost of production. Unit cost of production means SRAS will increase. Agree? Lower cost push inflation. That's one point. Correct? You are more productive means lower unit cost of production, right? No need to employ so many workers already, right? I don't need so many workers to work already because you're very productive. Productive means lower cost. Lower cost means SRAS increase. SRAS increase means lower cost push inflation, correct? Agree, lower cost push inflation. Done? Right? Not only that, when you are more productive, lower labor cost, another impact is that the price of export will be cheaper. Agree? Because you are more productive, lower cost, right? Means export cheaper, right? Export cheaper means export will increase, right? Correct? Same thing, export increase means AD will increase, multiple increase in national income, economic growth, employment. Correct, right? Standard of living. Agree? Right? And when the exports increase, current account improve, BOP account improves. Correct? Correct, right? Labor productivity, right? Lowest cost push inflation, increase economic growth, increase employment, increase BOP. Correct, right? It affects all other goals, right? Employment, economic growth, standard of living, inflation. Correct? Done? Okay, right? That's for point number 4. Okay, once done. Now all policies, policies. Okay? Question 1. Consider the intended and unintended consequences of government policy decision on the other economic agents. Okay, so this is the new syllabus, new syllabus. That means they'll ask you what is the intended consequence of the government policy and what is the unintended consequences. Okay, the unintended consequences. So I give example of this question, okay? On other consumers and producers, okay? So example, the government policy, example, maybe the government implement ERP. It's a government policy, right? Okay? Government policy is implementing ERP. The intended consequence, right? It's a new syllabus, people better listen. The intended consequence is that they want to lower traffic congestion. Agree? They want to solve traffic congestion is to lower the market failure problem. Agree? Of overconsumption of cars, right? Of overconsumption of cars, the government implement ERP to solve the traffic congestion issue, right? Agree? Because you overconsume cars already, right? There's pollution, there's traffic congestion, right? So the government implement ERP, that is the intended consequence, correct? Okay, now, then what is the unintended consequence? Okay, the unintended consequence is, okay, unintended consequence, number 1, unintended consequence is that when you increase ERP, the unintended consequence is, do you know that ERP increases business costs? Because when you delivery, the delivery charges will be higher now, right? Correct? You deliver goods, you use your lorry to deliver goods, the ERP, that means increased cost of production, right? Agree? The unintended consequence is that the business will suffer. Agree? The producer will have lower profits. That's the unintended consequence. Correct, people? Agree, right? So the question will ask you in the exam, right? What is the intended and unintended consequence of decision making by the government? Correct? The government implements some policy. How does it affect the producer and the consumers? Done? Correct, right? Question number 2 now. Limitation of all the policies. Okay, question 2. Okay, continue. Limitation of all the policies. Example, first limitation. Okay, all the policies number 1 is maybe the government do not have accurate information. Correct, right? They do not have accurate information. They do not have enough information, right? Second point, limitation is there might be time lag, right? Agree, whatever policy you implement, right? There might be some time lag, correct, right? Those who were here on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the time lag is that there is a recognition lag, there's an implementation lag, right? Recognition lag, implementation lag, and the last one, there's an effectiveness lag, correct? Agree? There are 3 types of time lag involved. Done. Right? Recognition lag, implementation and effectiveness lag. Correct? Okay. Third one. There's uncertainty of outcome. Right? Okay. When do we use this? Limitation of policy uncertainty. Okay. Uncertainty is when you do supply side policy, you want to educate and retrain. But no guarantee that the workers are receptive to upgrading. Correct? Right? Uncertainty. Uncertainty outcome is for supply side policy. Right? Supply side policy, no guarantee will take effect because the workers may not be receptive to upgrading. Correct, right? The workers may not be receptive to upgrade. Right? So uncertainty. Done. Okay, next one. Political acceptance, right? Okay, because you implement policy, right? The you may lose votes, right? Because if your decision you make is not very political, people may not be happy, right? The citizens may not be happy, then you might lose popular votes. Right? You might lose popular votes. Agree? Political acceptance. Example, you implement ERP, COE, people not happy, what? Right? You implement secret tax, alcohol tax, the people will not be happy. Right? So there will be political votes as well, right? Then you also should consider conflict, right? Whatever policy you implement, it may lead to other problems, right? There's policy conflicts. Agree? Those who were here over the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we went through that as well. Next one, methods of financing government expenditure, correct? When you do supply side policy, when you do subsidies, you need money, Agree, right? So you need to make sure you have government spending, you have money to spend, right? Agree, if you do supply side policy, if you do subsidies, right? You give free provision, direct provision, all these need money, right? So you must consider whether you have the money for it, right? And the last point, depend on size of multiplier. Correct, right? For countries like Singapore, right? Multiplier size small, correct? Done? Correct, people. As I go through, you don't know what I'm talking, you are deep shit already, I tell you. Standard of living, Standard of living, higher economic growth affects standard of living. This one, okay, right? Higher standard of living, higher GDP means higher purchasing power, means they can buy more consumer goods and services, the material as well will be higher, correct? Agree? Not only that, you also must argue, when there's higher economic growth, the government collect more tax revenue. Right? Higher economic growth, government collect more taxes, right? And then they can use the taxes to redistribute income to the poor, right? And they can use the taxes to fund for very good like education and healthcare. So the standard of living will be better, right? Will be better. Point number 1, agree? Right? So don't only talk about higher standard of living, higher purchasing power, right? Sorry, higher economic growth means higher purchasing power means higher standard of living. I want you to link to tax revenue. Right? Higher economic growth means government collect more taxes. Government collect more taxes means they can redistribute income to the poor. Right? Collect more taxes means they can spend on very good. So standard of living is higher. Agree? Point number 2 now. Material and non-material as well. Interpret data from CSQ that affects level of standard of living in the country. Right? So you must use the data from case study, and then based on the data, you must be able to say whether standard of living is better. Agree, right? Okay, so now listen. The data usually, right, is C, I, G, X, and M. Right? And then they give you some crappy non-material standard of living thing like maybe a pollution level, life expectancy. Usually, right, the data from case study, they will tell you maybe C is 20%, I is maybe 10%, X minus M maybe they say is 60%, you know, something like that, give you a percentage. Okay, so how does it affect standard of living? Okay, let me give the answer now. Listen, based on the data in the case study, the more you consume, right, the more you consume, the higher your material as well, correct? Then how about investment? Listen, investment. The more investment means the higher the future as well. Investment is future, correct? Consumption is current as well. Right, the more you consume now means your current standard of living is better. The more investment, right? The more investment there is on capital goods. Capital goods means future standard of living is higher. Correct? The more investment means the future standard of living is higher. Agree, right? Okay, G, government spending. Government spending, how does it affect standard of living? The answer is, it depends on what the government spend on. Right? If the government spend on military equipment, then it doesn't affect standard of living much. If the government spend on space exploration, also doesn't affect standard of living. Agree, right? So it depends on what the government spend on. If the government spend on healthcare, government spend on education, that means the non-material as well is good. Agree, right? Depends on what the government spend on. Exports, right, means you export to the rest of the world. Okay, now listen, it doesn't mean your standard of living is better. Doesn't mean. The more exports doesn't mean your standard of living is better, because you export to other country. That means the foreigner enjoy that, not you enjoy. Right? Exports means you export to some other country, right? That means foreigners are the one who enjoy the goods there. So it doesn't mean that your standard of living is better. Right? If your exports is high, it means that foreigner enjoy it. You are not the one enjoying it. You produce for other country to enjoy. So it doesn't mean standard of living is better, correct? Okay, how about import? Import is good. Because when you import means you are the one enjoying, right? Okay, if you import means you are the one enjoying, right? So it's good, that means your standard of living is higher. Okay, but also it depends on what you import. Because, listen, because if you import a lot, but if you import capital goods, that means your future as well will be high. Your current. Agree, right? Depend on what you import, right? Depend on what you import. If you import machinery, equipment, these are capital goods, right? Machinery, equipment is for future standard of living, right? Doesn't affect current, right? But if you import, for example, if you import toys, shoes, soaps, all these are consumer goods. Consumer goods, right? If you import consumer goods, then your standard of living is good. Agree? Depend on what you import. Consumer goods, standard of living high. Capital goods, future standard of living high. Correct? Capital goods means machinery and equipment. It will affect your future as well. Okay, right? And then some other data, maybe they give pollution and life expectancy. That's for non-material as well. Agree? Non-material standard of living. Done? Okay, now point number 3 now. Compare standard of living between countries, and then compare standard of living over time. Okay, now over time is this. Listen, a lot of people don't know what over time. Over time is GDP in Singapore in the 1970s was 5 million. In GDP in Singapore in year 2017 is 50 million. Does it mean that standard of living have increased over time? Right? You compare between 1970s and compare 2017. Right? The standard of living, has it improved over time? Agree, right? So the question asks you to compare between countries, standard of living, and compare over time standard of living. Correct? Right? So things like, this you must consider things like, which I went through last week. Consider things like level of pollution, leisure hours, correct? Correct? Level of pollution, leisure hours, right? Underground economy size. Underground economy is the prostitution and gambling, right? The size of the underground economy. Data collection method, correct? You collect data may not be accurate, right? Especially for rural areas, right? Large country with rural areas, correct? Data collection methods, pollution level, leisure hours, correct? You must consider all these things, right? Leisure hour, pollution index, right? Income inequality, correct? These are things you must consider, right? Income inequality, right? Underground economy, housewife, correct? Right? The size of a housewife, correct? This will affect standard of living as well. Size of, you know what I'm fucking already lah. Correct, right? Agree. Usually housewife quite fat on you. Correct, because housewife, yeah, correct. You know lah. Correct. Okay, continue. That's the point number 5. Number 5. Increase in investment. Increase in investment and impact on economy. Okay, increase in investment and impact on economy. Increase in investment. Point number 5. Point number 5. Increase in investment and how does it affect the economy? Okay, investment affect the economy. The answer is investment is affect AD and AS. Correct, right? Investment affect both AD and AS. So there's actual growth and there's potential growth. Correct? Right, actual growth and potential growth. Okay, this one quite okay. Right, but if it's FDI inflow, right, it's also investment, right? This one is affect capital account and the BOP account. Agree? Correct, right? This one is agree, right? Okay, now the one that a lot of you never write is that the profits of the FDI will be repatriated back to their home country. Right, whatever, right, in the long term, right, in the long run, whatever profits that FDI make, it will bring back to their home country. In the long run, when they bring back to the home country, means the current account will worsen, BOP will worsen. Right, see that I understand this part. I repeat again. FDI come in, your capital account will improve, BOP will improve, right? But in the long run, when they make profits, they will bring the profits back to their country, right? So in the long run, your current account worsen, your BOP worsen, right? Correct, right? The profits they earn, they'll bring back to their country, right? So in the long run, current account worsen, BOP worsen. Agree? Correct, right? Okay, once done. Next question. Factors in the country. What affects I? Investment level. Okay, the answer is this. Corporate tax, right? Corporate tax will affect level of investment in the country. That's first point. Right, corporate tax. Second point, the affects level of investment. Interest rate. Interest rate will affect FDI. FDI, not local investment. Not local investment. Sorry, local investment, not FDI. Bloody, I repeat. Right, factors affecting investment. Corporate tax, I write for you, right? Interest rate, correct? Because they borrow money to invest, right? Corporate tax, interest rate. Okay, next one is quality of skilled labor, Agree? Quality of labor will also affect investment level. Next one, business confidence, or we use the word outlook. Right, business confidence and outlook, correct? It will affect investment level as well, correct? Government policy, like maybe availability of infrastructure, will also affect investment level, correct? This one 10-mark question now, right? What influences level of investment in the country? Okay, so corporate tax, interest rate, quality of labor, outlook, and infrastructure, correct? Okay, next one. What affects level of consumption? Consumption level in Singapore. Okay, consumption level. Consumption level in Singapore. Okay, first one, interest rate. Okay, consumption level, interest rate, that's one. Right, will affect consumption. Next one, business confidence, affect consumption, correct? Interest rate, business confidence, correct? Next one, maybe consumption. Business confidence, interest rate. Business confidence means outlook, right? Outlook. Okay, right? Affect level of investment. Income level also affect level of investment. Right? The higher income, the more you, consumption, right? The more you consume. Correct? Right? The other one is availability of credit. Will also affect consumption. Correct? The other one is expectation of future prices. If you expect future prices to increase, you faster buy now, right? Correct? So the last one is income tax. Point number 6, income tax. Right? Income tax will also affect consumption level. Okay, right? So consumption level affected by income tax, interest rate, business confidence, income level, availability of credit, expectation of future prices. Correct? Done? Okay, next one. Market failure now. Finally, macro done already. Now let's go to micro now. Okay, market failure. Market failure, there are these types of market failure, right? You must define market failure. Right, the free market fails to allocate scarce resources. The free market fails to allocate resources efficiently. Correct, right? Okay, now point number 2. Sources of market failure. Very good. Very good. There's external benefit. Very good. There's external cost. Correct. Public goods. Non-rivalrous, non-excludable. Correct? Non-rivalrous, non-excludable. Market dominance only for H2. Market dominance is a market failure, right? Because they will charge higher prices and lesser output. Right? Market dominance diagram, you must draw this up. If you're H2, right? You must draw this one. DD equals to AR, MR, MC curve, MC cut MR, this is the quantity, this is the price, correct? Of the monopoly. Agree? Right? But it is market dominance, right? Because of market dominance, they charge very high price. By right, it should be demand supply intersect. By right, it should be this is the price, this is the quantity. Correct? Market dominance diagram, right? This is the diagram draw, right? And therefore, because the price is higher and the output is lesser, so it's a market failure. Agree, right? So this is a market failure. Immobility of factor of production, those who were here last week's extra lesson. Immobility of factor of production, right, refers to occupational immobility, right? And the other one, geographical immobility. Occupational and geographical, people. If you don't know, you better let me know. I can send you the videos or whatever. If you don't know, I can send you the notes. Right? Occupational immobility and geographical immobility. Occupational immobility is because they don't want to, they cannot move because they do not have the qualifications. They don't have skills, right? Occupational immobility, right, means they don't have the qualifications to have the skills. Geographical immobility, means that because they are unwilling to shift, they don't want to travel. They don't want to travel, right? So they are immobility, right? They don't want to travel, they don't want to shift because distance very far. Agree? That's geographical, right? I went through a question on that. So if you were not here last week, you can let me know. I'll send it to you. Okay, next one. Income inequality is also a market failure, right? Income inequality because income inequality means the resources are diverted towards those who are able and willing to pay. Those who are willing to pay, those who are able to pay, right? The resources will be diverted to them. So the rich people get more resources than the poor, right? The rich are able to pay, so the resources will be diverted towards the rich, right? The poor will not even get to fulfill their basic needs. So it's a market failure, right? The rich can fulfill both their needs and their wants. The poor cannot even fulfill their needs. Therefore, it's a market failure, correct? Because the resources diverted inordinately to the rich. Correct? Income inequality means the resources are diverted too much to the rich really. Agree? Okay, next one. Negative externality. Negative externality means third party suffer, right? Third party cost. Agree? Positive externality, third party benefits, right? Okay, information failure is the hot topic that guarantee this year will come out. If you are H2, information failure must talk about imperfect info. Imperfect info means the difference between perceived and actual, correct? Imperfect info means there is a difference between perceived and actual, correct? This is for H1 and H2, right? Perceived and actual. Asymmetric information means one party knows more than the other, right? So we always talk about asymmetric information, use about the example of used car and insurance, right? The person who wants to buy the insurance has more information than the seller of the insurance company. Remember? Right? Asymmetric information, right? Right? There's moral hazard and there's adverse selection. Right? If I H2, right? Moral hazard means you already buy the insurance, so you don't care, right? You don't take good care of it because you know that never mind, anything happen, the insurance company will pay. Agree, right? You buy the bicycle insurance already, you don't lock the bicycle because you know that the insurance will pay. Bicycle go missing also never mind, right? Bicycle, the insurance will pay. Right? So there's a moral hazard problem. Done? Okay, next one. Point number 3, the difference between a public good and a private good. Okay, the difference is public good is non-excludable, non-rivalrous. Right? Non-excludable, non-rivalrous. For private good, it is excludable and it is rivalrous. Right? Private good is excludable and rivalrous. You can exclude and it's rivalrous. Agree? Right? That's for private good. Okay, right? Once done. Question number 4, there are many things you can implement. Many policies that you can implement. Okay, so first policy, you can direct provision. Direct provision by the government is only used for public good. Agree? Then you must make sure you go and memorize the evaluation point. Go and memorize the evaluation point, right? Public good, direct provision, right? Taxes is for demerit good, so the government will tax, correct? Demerit good or negative externality item. Subsidies, then you must memorize the diagram, people. The diagram, subsidies, right, is for merit good or positive externality diagram. Tradable permit, there's no diagram, so you just memorize how it works. Those who were here in the market failure lesson, I think last week, right, the extra lesson, those who were here for market lesson, market failure extra lesson, I went through all this already. Right, tradable permit means the government determine the total amount of pollution they allow, then they distribute the permit to the firms. Agree? That's the maximum they can pollute. If they pollute more, they must buy more permit. They pollute lesser, they can sell away the extra permit. Agree, right? The prices of the tradable permit is determined by the intersection of demand supply. Correct? Demand supply intersect will give you the price of the tradable permits. Correct, right? Make sure you know how the tradable permits work, plus limitation. Okay, then rules and regulation. Rules and regulation, there's complete ban. You must know how to draw the ban diagram. I went through this also in the extra lesson. Right, the ban diagram. So you don't know, you better message me, people. You don't know what I'm talking about, message me. Right, there's a ban diagram as well. Right, public campaigns. Okay, so these are policies to solve. Right, and then you must apply it to the different contexts. The question can appear for air pollution, factory, cigarette, traffic congestion, education, housing, R&D, gambling, healthcare, clean water, etc. Right, and then you must memorize some Singapore examples. Agree? These are the different contexts they can set. Education, you must memorize some Singapore example. Traffic congestion, healthcare, you must memorize Singapore example. Agree, right? You must know things like maybe CPF, ERP, COE, right? You must have some Singapore examples. Okay, point number 6, government failure. Usually, we use it in the conclusion paragraph. Okay, conclusion paragraph to say that there might be government failure. When you implement policies, there might be government failure, right? Example, red tape, bureaucracy, and time lag. Correct, right? Time lag, red tape, bureaucracy, right? Because by the time the government implement policy, too late already, right? There might be red tape, bureaucracy, time lag, and the government do not have perfect information. Agree? So they don't know what is the extent of the external cost. How much to tax? Well, they also don't know lah, because the extent of the external cost, they are not sure. Agree? Imperfect info, right? The government do not know what is the exact amount of the external cost, exact amount of the external benefit. Agree, right? What is the tax? What is the subsidies? They don't know. Okay? Market structure later I'll go through. We go through elasticities first. Okay, so page 4. Elasticity, Elasticity, okay? PED and PS. And then you must memorize the formula. Okay, the formula. PED, PS, and the formula. Okay, PED, PS. Define and the formula you must memorize. Okay, right? Degree of responsiveness, right? Of change in quantity demanded to a given change in price, comma, ceteris paribus. Right? The word ceteris paribus behind must be there, right? Then you must know the significance of the sign and the magnitude for the concept of PED, XED, and YED. Okay, the sign, right? For PED is always negative. For PS is always positive. Correct? Agree, huh? Okay, why? Why PED always negative? Because of inverse relationship, correct? Inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? Price goes up, quantity demanded fall, right? Price fall, quantity demand increase, right? Opposite direction, right? So confirm always negative one, correct? Agree, huh? For PES, confirm positive because of direct relationship. Price goes up, quantity supply increase also. Price goes down, quantity supply also fall, right? So always positive, correct? Agree, huh? Then XED. If it's more than 0, it's positive, right? More than 0 means substitute, correct? If it's negative less than 0, right, it's a complement. Agree, ba? Correct, right? Less than 0 is complement, right? More than 0 is substitute, right? Correct, right? More than 0 is substitute. Okay? Then YED, income elasticity of demand, right? If it's more than 1, is luxury. Between 0 to 1 is a necessity. Less than 0 is inferior, correct? Agree, right? The sign, right? You must know the signs. What does the sign stand for? Correct, right? More than 0, more than 1, right? More than 1 means luxury. 0 to 1 means normal necessity. Normal necessity, right? Less than 0 is inferior. Correct, Okay, right? The sign. Okay, next one. Factors influencing PED, right? PED, XED, and YED factors, right? So the PED factors, right? Recap, eventually. The PED factors is maybe a degree of necessity, correct? Right? Proportion of income spent. Agree? Right? These are all the PED factors I think you should know. Right? The degree of necessity, right? Availability of substitutes, correct? Availability of substitutes, right? Proportion of income spent, correct? Time period, blah blah blah, correct? Right? I think you should know how to do this, right? Factors influencing. Okay? Right? PES, factors influencing PES. What affects the PES, right? The factors are, example, right? Time period will also affect, right? If it's long gestation period, inelastic, right? Long gestation period inelastic, right? Okay, that's one. Another one that affect PES is mobility of factor of production. Of factor mobility. Correct? Factor mobility will affect as well, right? The other one is availability of stocks, correct? Availability of stocks and availability of spare capacity. Correct? Right? If you have spare capacity, means it's elastic, right? Correct? If you have ready stock, it's also elastic. Correct, right? Elasticities. Okay, PES. Done. Okay, point number 4. Apply PED, PS, right, for profit maximizing producers in decision making. PED in decision making. This is not hot topic. This is not hot topic. PED in decision making, right? So the answer is, if it's elastic, they should lower price. Inelastic, they should up the price. Correct? Okay, using PED in decision making means that if the PED is elastic, we should lower the price. Inelastic, we should up the price. Correct, right? Done. Right, that's for PED, right? However, you cannot always lower the price, right? It will lead to price war, and therefore we should do non-price competition, right? Non-price competition, right? You should differentiate the product, right? Improve the feature, improve the quality, right? Do non-price competition. Correct, right? So PED, elastic with lower price, inelastic we up the price, right? Agree, but you must do non-price competition as well. Next one, PED, FCD, how does it use for government decision making? Government, how does the government use elastic? Government, how they use elastic? Okay, point number one, you guys something recap. How government use elastic? Point number one is this. Government will decide if they tax inelastic item like cigarette, then tax no use. There's only a less than proportionate for, right? First point, agree? Point number 5, people, don't drink. Government, right? Government, how can the government use PED? Right, the first point is that in terms of taxing cigarette, very good, right? Like cigarette, alcohol is habit forming in nature, addictive in nature, so the PED is inelastic, right? PED is inelastic. So even if you tax cigarette, no use, what? There's only a less than proportional fall in quantity demanded. Correct, right? Less than proportional fall in quantity demanded, right? So not very effective, correct? First point, okay? That's how the government can use elastic, right? Second point, government can use elastic also, right? In terms of macro, the government will use elastic in terms of Marshall-Lerner condition. Agree? When you depreciate the currency, right, you export cheaper, more people buy export. Correct? Then the AD increase, economic growth increase, employment level increase, right? But you must assume Marshall-Lerner condition holds, correct? Agree, yes? Where the PEDX and the PEDM is more than 1, right? PEDX plus PEDM more than 1, right? So the government can use PED to determine whether the Marshall-Lerner condition holds or not. When you depreciate currency, you must assume Marshall-Lerner condition holds. Agree, alright? That's how the government can use PED concepts. Done. Okay, next one. Apply PED and PS to primary market and manufactured market. Okay, why? Primary and manufactured. Okay, listen. Primary and manufactured to primary product, manufactured product. Okay, why? Okay, why these two? Primary and manufacturer. Okay, I'll tell you why. Because for primary product, come on, persevere. For primary product, both PED and PS is inelastic. Primary product, both PED and PS is inelastic for primary product. For manufactured product, both PED and PS is elastic. Elastic. Right, this one is inelastic because it's necessity, lack of substitute. And then inelastic also because long gestation period. Primary product, right? Long gestation period, right? So PS inelastic, right? Agree, So for primary product, both PED and PS is inelastic. Right? Both PED and PS inelastic. And therefore, for primary product, right, there will be a sharp increase in prices. Whenever demand change, right, it's sharp increase in prices. Okay, so the diagram you should draw is this. Price, quantity, whenever demand increase, agree, demand increase, right? The supply is price inelastic compared to manufactured product is elastic. This is manufactured, this is primary. Agree? For primary product is inelastic, supply inelastic, right? Then for manufactured supply elastic, right? So do you realize, this is look at the screen, people. Do you realize that for elastic primary product, the price only increase a little bit? But for primary product, the price increase much more, right? Agree, the price increase much more, right? Agree, that's how the question will be said. They will ask you, how come, why do the price of primary products, agriculture, right? Primary product is agriculture. How come sharp increase in price? Right, primary product compared to manufactured goods, not so sharp. The price doesn't increase sharply. Right, it's because of different elasticities. Correct, right? Because the primary product is PDPS inelastic. Right, it's inelastic. Done. Correct? Okay, right. Point number 7. Point number 7. Explain the limitations of the use of elastic concepts in the real world. Okay, limitation in the real world. The limitations of elastic concepts. Okay, the answer is this. In the real world, elastic concepts does not hold because number 1, tastes and preferences change over time. Correct? Okay, tastes and preferences change over time. Right? So in the real world, doesn't hold lah, right? Because there's no such thing as ceteris paribus, remember? Right? In the real world, no such thing as ceteris paribus, right? Tastes and preferences change over time, right? So elastic concepts may not be useful, correct? First point, okay? Right, second point, right? The data collected to calculate the PED value may not be accurate also, right? You calculate PED, you need to get some data, right? The data collected may not be accurate, correct? Okay, the data collected in the real world may not be accurate, right? So elastic also may be difficult to use because your PED value is not accurate. Agree? Third point, right? Elastic concepts also got limitation because third point, because there's a time lag between collation of the data and the implementation of the measure. Right? I repeat, you collate the data and you implement the measure, right? There's a time lag in between. Right? There's a time lag between the collation of data and the implementation of the measure. Correct? Collate the data and implement measure, there's a time lag. Done? Okay, point numbers, right? Okay, roughly okay, point number 7. Okay, next one. Last part is demand supply. Demand supply, you define demand supply. Price adjustment process. Okay, in case you don't know what is price adjustment process. Price adjustment process means this. Right? If there's a shortage at the original price, it will lead to an upward pressure on price, correct? Then the other way is, if there's a surplus at the original price, it will lead to a downward pressure on price. Agree? Right? Upward pressure and downward pressure. This part okay? Right? Upward pressure and downward pressure. Done? Hey, people are texting. Okay, right? Got you. So price adjustment process means there's a shortage at the original price leading to an upward pressure on price, right? Or you can say there's a surplus at the original price leading to a downward pressure on price. Okay, point number 3, you must know the determinant of demand supply, right? So things like taste and preference, income level, correct? Taste and preference, income level, right? Population size, agree? Right? Price of substitute, price of complements, this will affect the demand, correct? The demand factor, right? Supply factor is like weather condition, correct? Supply factor, right? The weather condition, cost of production price, government policy, right? These are things that affect supply. Agree, people, right? I hope you recap, Okay, next one, price mechanism, how it allocates scarce resource. That means you must answer the 3 questions. For whom to produce, how to produce, and what to produce. Okay, so I recap again. This one in case you don't know. For whom to produce, how to produce, and what to produce. Okay, listen. It depends on the price mechanism because the price mechanism works as a signaling function. Right? Price mechanism is a signaling function. It signals to the producers what to produce. Because if the price increases, you are signaling to the producers to produce more. Correct? Price goes up, you are telling them to produce more. If the price goes down, you are telling them to produce lesser. Correct? That is what to produce, right? So prices serve as a signaling function. Correct? Follow people, make sure you understand, right? Price serve as a signaling function. Right? How to produce? Is that how to produce? Means how to produce? We use the cheapest method of production. How to produce? How to produce means we use the cheapest method of production to produce. So if the labor cost is cheapest, we use labor cost. If machinery is cheaper, we use machinery. Right? That's how to produce, right? If labor cost is cheap, we use labor cost to produce, right? If capital is cheaper, we use capital, right? Capital means machinery. Okay, right? So that's how it goes. For whom to produce? This is last. For whom to produce? We produce for those with the ability to pay. Money, you got ability to pay, I produce for you. Correct, right? For whom to produce is the ability to pay. Right? Based on the ability to pay. That's for whom to produce. Done? Okay, right? So that's how the price mechanism allocates scarce resource. Okay, next one. Point number 5. You must apply demand supply determinant to all this market. Property market, oil market, labor market, taxi market, blah blah blah. Car market, right? Demand supply, how does it shift? Right? The market style question. Okay, market style question. Market style question, right? I told you market style question, I told you the step is this. Demand factor. These are steps. After later you must give the supply factor. Correct? And then because you talk about demand factor, you must bring in PES. Agree? Supply factor, you must talk about opposite, bring in PED. Correct? After that, later, you must draw, third point, you must draw a combined diagram. Agree? You must show the extent, right? The extent. Whether is it more than or is it less than, correct? The extent, right? Whether is it more than or less than, draw a combined diagram, correct? Then point number 4, bring in the price adjustment process, correct? Agree, right? That's the market question now, right? How it affects the equilibrium price and the equilibrium output. Right? That's the market style question. Agree, market style question, right? That's how you answer. Done. Okay, right? That's the market style question. Okay, next one. Price control, price floor, price ceiling, and its limitation. Okay, so price floor, demand supply, right? The floor is this price ceiling. Right? Floor is demand supply, the floor is on top. Agree? Right? So you must know how to draw the diagram and then the limitation. Right? The limitation is that over here there will be a shortage. Over here there will be a surplus. Correct? Agree? Price floor, price ceiling, right? There's a shortage and there's a surplus. Okay, next. Incidence of tax, incidence of subsidies. I went through this many lessons ago. Incidence of tax, right? When you tax, the supply will fall. Right? When you tax, right? If it's inelastic, demand, right? Inelastic, you tax already, this is the amount of tax. Correct? You tax already, this is the amount that the producer must pay. Right? And then the top area is the amount that the consumer will pay. Correct? Incidence of tax diagram, remember? Right? The incidence of tax, consumer pay on top, producer pay below. Correct? Incidence of tax diagram, right? Then the other one is incidence of subsidy. Subsidy diagram, right? Incidence of subsidy, viewer. Subsidy diagram is drawn this way. When you subsidize, the supply will increase. Correct? When you subsidize, right? Okay, when you subsidize, supply will increase. And then if it's inelastic, okay, look at the screen. The amount of subsidy is this height here. This height here is the amount of subsidy. It's on the right. This is tax. Tax is on the left. I went through this many lessons ago. Tax is over here. Tax, this is tax, right? The subsidy is on the right side on here. Okay, then you talk all the way to the left, talk all the way to the left, right? Okay? And therefore, this area here is the producer. Sorry, consumer. Right? And then the top area is the producer. This is for subsidy. Incidence of subsidy. Okay, right? You don't know, you better message me to let me know, right? Today I'll teach you again, right? Subsidy and tax incidence diagram. Right, I taught this many lessons ago. Incidence of tax, incidence of subsidies. Done? Okay, last part. Scarcity, choice, of course, right? Okay, so define scarcity, choice, of course, right? Limited resource to satisfy unlimited human wants, correct? Limited resources to satisfy unlimited human wants. Then use PPC to demonstrate scarcity, choice, of course. Using PPC, right? So draw the PPC, right, to show scarcity, choice, of course. I give the answer for this. Point number 2. Using PPC to explain scarcity, choice, of course. The PPC is here. Point A represents a limit. You are underutilizing your resources. Point B represents scarcity. Right? Point C and point D represents a choice. C and D represents choice. Right? Point A represents unemployment. Agree? Right? I repeat one more time. PPC, right? Point B means scarcity because it's outside the PPC. Agree? Represents scarcity, right? Point C and D represents choice. Because you make a choice whether you want to produce here or here. Right? Point A means underemployment, right? You never use your resources fully. Correct, right? You never use your resources fully. Okay, so that's using PPC. Done. Okay, point number 3 now. Identify the different factors of production. Your factor of production is land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, technology, right? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, technology. So land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Right? This is your land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. That's your factors of production, right? To use the land, you must pay rental. To use the labor, you pay wages. To use capital, you pay interest. To use entrepreneurship, you pay profits. Right? So that's your factor of production and the cost of production. This is factor of production, right? This is cost of production. You see that? Correct, right? The factor of production is land, the cost of production is rental. Labor, wages. Capital, interest. Entrepreneurship, profit. Correct? Agree, huh? Done. Okay, next one. Point number 4. Rational decision making process by economic agents, right? Consumers, we want to maximize satisfaction. Producer, maximize profit, correct? Correct? Then government maximize welfare. Correct? Okay, now then next one. Point number 5, I went through I think last month. Recognizing constraint, right? You must first gather information and consider perspective, weigh the benefit and cost, recognize trade-off, and recognize intended and unintended consequences. Correct? 2 lessons ago, I think I went through this in huge detail. Recognize the constraint. Constraint means there's scarcity. Agree on the scarcity. Then after that, you must gather information, consider perspective of different people. Correct? And then you must find out what is the benefit of it, what is the cost of it. And then there's trade-off. Trade-off is intended consequence and the unintended consequence. Correct? Right? We went through this decision-making process, right? Okay. Point number 6. I also went through that. Point number 6. Normative and positive statement. In case you will not hear this in syllabus, positive statement means anything that can be proven. As long as I can prove, it's a positive statement. No need to be truthful. No need to be truthful. As long as I can prove. So I give an example of a positive statement. Right? Positive statement is I am 100 kg. Right? I am 100 kg in weight. It is a positive statement. Right? As long as you can prove, you can put me on a weighing scale. Right? A weighing scale, you can prove. It's a positive statement. Okay, right? A normative statement is just an opinion. It's just an opinion. So if I say that I'm very handsome, right? It's a normative statement. Agree, it cannot be proven because it's a judgment. Agree, as an opinion, right? Opinion means right? Opinion means right? It cannot be proven or not, right? Okay, done. Okay, now listen. Those if a H2, right? I went through all these points already. If you came for the extra lesson, I went through everything. If you came for the extra